You get this in 1943, the U.S. Army published a pamphlet basically saying that the America First movement is a fascist movement. So to start out with credit where credit's due, I got this from Heather Cox Richardson, who has one of the finest newsletters on Substack. She's a historian, a well-known, world-famous historian. And heathercoxrichardson.substack.com is her Substack newsletter. And this is, I think, really important stuff. I'm old enough to remember some of this stuff, some of these documents that it was called the Department of War during World War II, that they produced, making their way into our school. You know, seeing these things in elementary school in the 1950s, in the mid-1950s. So anyhow, what she points out is starting in 1943, the War Department published a series of pamphlets for mostly enlisted men, you know, for the U.S. Army personnel in the European theater. They were called Army Talks. And by the way, I've quoted from these things before. I used to have a collection of these. It's someplace floating around someplace here in the office, or in the studio, but it's been a couple of years since I read from them. So let me just share. This is from the March 24th, 1945 Army Talks newsletter that went out to everybody in the European theater, all the soldiers, and it was the topic was fascism. And everything I'm saying here is I'm quoting from the U.S. Army. You're away from home, separated from your families, no longer at a civilian job or at school, and many of you are risking your very lives because of a thing called fascism. So what is fascism? Fascism is not the easiest thing to analyze, nor, once in power, is it easy to destroy. It is important for our future and that of the world that as many of us as possible understand the causes and practices of fascism in order to combat it. Fascism is government by the few and for the few. The objective is seizure and control of the economic, political, social, and cultural life of the state. The people run democratic governments, but fascist governments run the people. The basic principles of democracy stand in the way of their desires. Hence, democracy must go! Exclamation mark. Anyone who's not a member of their inner gang has to do what he's told. They permit no civil liberties, no equality before the law. Fascism treats women as mere breeders. Children, kitchen, and the church was the Nazi slogan for women. Again, this is the U.S. Army publishing this. Fascists make their own rules and change them when they choose. They maintain themselves in power by the use of force, combined with propaganda based on primitive ideas of blood and race, by skillful manipulation of fear and hate, and by a false promise of security. Their propaganda glorifies war and insists it is smart and realistic to be pitiless and violent. Fascists understood the fundamental principle of democracy, faith in the common sense of the common people, was the direct opposite of the fascist principle of rule by the elite few. Again, quoting from the U.S. Army, 1943. So fascists fought democracy. They played political, religious, social, and economic groups against each other and seized power while these groups struggled. The pamphlet warned, quote, "We once laughed Hitler off as a harmless little clown with a funny mustache." And indeed, the U.S. has experienced sorry instances of mob sadism, lynchings, vigilantism, terror, and suppression of civil liberties. We have had our hooded gangs, Black Legions, silver shirts, and racial and religious bigots. All of them, in the name of Americanism, have used undemocratic methods and doctrines which can be properly identified as fascist. They will try to gain power under the guise of super-patriotism and super-Americanism. And they will use three techniques. First, they would pit religious, racial, and economic groups against one another to break down national unity. Part of that effort to divide and conquer will be a well-planned hate campaign against minority races, religions, and other groups. Second, they would deny any need for international cooperation because that would fly in the face of their insistence that their supporters are better than anyone else. In place of international cooperation, the Army wrote, the fascists seek to substitute a perverted sort of ultranationalism, which tells their people that they are the only people in the world who count. With this goes hatred and suspicion toward the people of all other nations. And third, fascists would insist that, quote, the world has but two choices, either fascism or communism. And they label as communism or communists everyone who refuses to support them. It is vitally important, the Army wrote, to learn to spot native fascists. Even though they adopt names and slogans with popular appeal, drape themselves in the American flag, and attempt to carry out their program in the name of democracy, of the democracy they are trying to destroy. You get this in 1943, the U.S. Army published a pamphlet basically saying that the America First movement is a fascist movement. They didn't name America First, but it's obvious, who they're talking about. The only way to stop the rise of fascism in the United States, the U.S. Army told our soldiers in 1943, quote, is by making our democracy work and by actively cooperating to preserve world peace and security. In the midst of the insecurity of the modern world, the hatred at the root of fascism fulfills a triple mission. By dividing people, it weakens democracy. By getting men to hate rather than to think, it prevents them from seeking the real cause and a democratic solution to their problems. And by falsely promising prosperity, it lures people to embrace its security. Fascism, the U.S. Department of War warned our soldiers in the spring of 1943, fascism thrives on indifference and ignorance. It requires being alert and on guard against the infringement not only of our own freedom, but the freedom of every American. If we permit discrimination, prejudice, or hate to rob anyone of his democratic rights, our own freedom and all democracy is threatened. And this is exactly what's going on right now. We are now seeing with ICE and now these recruiting efforts by ICE. This is nuts. There's a new thing. We'll have our home again. We will have our home again. Joinice.gov. Join.ice.gov. This was just tweeted out by the Department of Homeland Security. We will have our home again. Now, this is the great, Rachel Bitecofer is writing about this over on her Substack newsletter, and she says this is not a metaphor, nor is it, and it's not policy language, it's a statement of purpose. This is the great replacement theory being put into operation by ICE, saying that, international Jewish conspiracy funded a program to put black and brown people in the place of white people in the United States, and we are reversing that. I mean, we will have our home again, Rachel Bitecofer writes, is the emotional core of great replacement ideology, a white nationalist belief system that frames demographic change as dispossession and recasts our nation as something that's been stolen and must be taken back. This is why in Charlottesville they were chanting, Jews will not replace us. They didn't mean that they would be replaced by Jewish people. They meant that Jewish people were funding a program to replace white people with black and brown people. That's the great replacement theory. That's the thing that is animating this administration. This is the core of J.D. Vance and Stephen Miller and Donald Trump's philosophy. I mean, keep in mind, Donald Trump and his father were busted by the federal government back in the day for refusing to rent to black people. This is fascism. And the great replacement theory is the rationale for fascism. And it's extraordinarily dangerous and extraordinarily destructive.